Hey everyone, welcome back to the lab. In this video, we're going to be talking about effective meetings and specifically how to avoid ineffective meetings so we can hopefully have more frequent effective meetings. Okay, so what are we going to talk about? So the main problem that I'm trying to tackle in this video is that meetings are expensive and we tend to do quite a lot of them. So my solution for that is to provide some tips for effective meetings and specifically how to avoid the common pitfalls and patterns of ineffective meetings. So at the end of this video, hopefully if you apply some of these tips, you'll have less wasted time and resources on these ineffective meetings. You'll hopefully have a template and kind of game plan for having more focused meetings to avoid those ineffective meetings. And then finally, we'll probably have some good heuristics to identify ineffective meetings. And my guess is that if you haven't been doing these things before, you'll be surprised by just how many meetings you do that are just not really effective. So to talk about this, first I'm going to talk about who I am, give you a background of who I am and why you should listen to this random guy on the internet talking to you about how to do better meetings. And then we'll finally get into our topic. So first thing I want to talk about is meetings are expensive, which I think we all know, but maybe we kind of forget just how expensive these things are. Then we're going to be talking about some of the common pitfalls for ineffective meetings. So why are they so wasteful? And this will give us a good kind of shared understanding for going into how to actually solve this. How do we run effective meetings given the pitfalls that lead to bad ones? And then I'm going to lead you off with some useful resources that will kind of bridge the gap between the theory of why these meetings are bad and how to solve them and actually applying them in your own meetings in your own org or your own life. So let's get started. Who am I? So basically, I'm just a guy that hates meetings. I think a lot of them are really wasteful and they are just super expensive and just have really, really low return on investment. So to be more specific, I'm a guy who hates ineffective meetings because I do think meetings are useful, just most of them aren't. And what experience do I have to say this with confidence? Well, I basically describe myself as a technologist and tinypreneur, and I've held several roles across various orgs, mostly a software engineer, often a tech lead leading projects and teams, and then throughout it all, an entrepreneur kind of launching my own things. And I've had some experience across many different kinds of sectors. So ABT, which is a really small big data company, MasterCard, which we all know is like a huge global company, Meta Instagram, which we would consider as big tech, recently Reddit, which is a late stage startup, and finally HAMY Labs, which I've been running through parallel across many of these experiences, which is my bootstrap startup. If you don't believe me, you can check LinkedIn because LinkedIn is always right with the link below. And basically what I want you to take away from this kind of background is that I've had some experience across many different organization sizes and organization styles and paradigms. And over that time, I've observed literally thousands of meetings. And what I've observed most about them is that most of them are ineffective. And considering they're so expensive and considering we do them so often, it seems like an obvious area of optimization. One last note is that you've probably noticed that my scope of expertise and experience here is really focused for tech and product orgs. And so I know that this works in those organizations. My guess is that it will also work for other types of organizations, but I don't know for sure, so your mileage may vary. This is your warning that this is definitely working for tech product orgs, maybe not for other ones. But if you're in another org, let me know, because I am curious to see if there's actually differences in the effectiveness of these meetings. Okay, with that out of the way, and if you're still going to believe me based on my background and expertise, let's talk about why meetings are so expensive. So I think there's three main reasons why meetings are so expensive, and because we're a business or org trying to be efficient, we want to get good ROI on our expensive things. So the first thing that I see that makes them expensive is that it ties up a lot of people. And so this obviously incurs the base cost of we are paying these people per hour, even if it's salaried, it's basically per hour. And so whereas if it was just one person, we'd only just have one hourly rate. Now if there's 10 people, there's 10 hourly rates that we're incurring the cost for. And this is important because meetings are also synchronous. And so we are causing all these people and their hourly rates to be doing the same thing at the same time. And if we learned anything from the recent explosion of work from home, it's that people's schedules are typically different. People would rather or are more effective at doing different things at different times of days. And since workloads are different, there's going to be an opportunity cost of forcing them all to do the same thing at the same time, because it's possible and probable that that time could have been spent more effectively on something else had they been able to choose what they spent that time on. Examples of this are like the cost of context switching, or needing to have 3 hours of deep work to accomplish something, but there's a meeting in the middle of it, things like that. And then the final thing that leads to meetings being expensive is that we do them so often. Most people have many meetings per week, and then sometimes we redo the same meetings over and over. And so we take this really expensive thing, and now we're like, we're going to do it a lot. So meetings are expensive, and we do them a lot, which makes them even more expensive. And because I like formalizing things, we can kind of think of the cost of a meeting as, the duration hours that meeting takes times the sum of the person cost per hour. So all the people that are in that meeting and the costs that they incur. And the person cost per hour can be simplified basically to, their wage per hour plus that opportunity cost per hour. And I would guess that the opportunity cost per hour is actually more expensive in many cases than the wage rate per hour, because the reason we're paying them the wage is to actually do the work. And so that opportunity cost, I think, is a big variable here that many people forget. And so just to hammer this home in concrete terms, let's take a very simple scenario. So let's say that the wage rate per hour is $50 and the opportunity cost per hour for simplicity is 0. But again, I think opportunity costs is probably more like a multiple of like 1 to 2 or even more, just because of the nature of deep work. But for now, I'll just say it's 0. And so if we take this formula and we look at like a 30-minute one-on-one meeting, then our formula is a half hour times 2 people times $50. And so this is like maybe you and your manager or something. The cost of this meeting is $50, which could be reasonable if you talk about something useful, in this 30-minute meeting. But the problem, I think, is when we kind of scale up these meetings, because people forget how the cost scales. And so if we have a 1-hour meeting, and we have 10 participants, now our formula is 1 hour times 10 times $50. And the total cost of this meeting is $500. And so when we think about ROI, the return on investment of these meetings, scenario B needs to be 10 times more valuable to us than scenario A for us to receive the same value, the same return on our investment. And my hypothesis is oftentimes this is not the case, and the ROI is much lower. Now, all that said, and our understanding that meetings are really expensive and we do them a lot, I still think they are useful. And I think they can be worth the cost. So I'm not saying we shouldn't have meetings. I'm just, trying to make it concrete how expensive they are. And I think they can be useful because they're one of the few things that allows us very high bandwidth communication. And so this means in a given period of time, you can have a lot more knowledge sharing, just a lot more concepts talked about, and a lot more back and forth in a given period of time. And this can lead to faster decisions. And this can lead to higher empathy of those decisions, so maybe we feel a little bit better afterwards. Now, given that a lot more work is happening remote recently, maybe the empathy factors are a little less, maybe the knowledge sharing factors are a little less as well. But typically this is like the reasons that we have meetings. But that's only if they are useful. And I think we'll talk about in the next section about what are common patterns that make them not useful and ineffective. And so if there's what I want you to take away from this section really is that meetings are expensive, and that more meetings leads to more cost. And as costs go up, we actually need them to be more valuable in order to get the same ROI, to get the same value out of it. Okay, so now that we understand, why meetings are so expensive and why we really got to manage these costs, let's talk about the causes of ineffective meetings. And I keep saying this idea of like ineffective meetings. What do I mean by them? And I think, at its core, what I think an ineffective meeting is something that does not accomplish the goal of the meeting. And the problem is, if we don't accomplish the goal of the meeting, then we now need to have typically additional meetings to accomplish that original goal. And if we put this into perspective with how expensive meetings are, it now means that one expensive thing turns into 2 or even 3 or 4 of these expensive things to accomplish the thing we wanted to accomplish in that first expensive thing, that first meeting. And so when I think of ineffective meetings, this is what I really think about as making such a meeting ineffective. And so if we take the flip side of that, what is an effective meeting? Well, I think an effective meeting just accomplishes the goal that it was set out to do. It just does the thing in the set amount of time that we wanted to do the thing. And if we can do that, then we no longer need to have an additional meeting for that same goal. Obviously, when you meet, probably new things will come up and we'll have to, resolve those as well, but that's at least progress, right? We're not redoing everything to accomplish the same thing that we should have done in the first place. And so now let's go into those common things that lead to these ineffective meetings, these redos of meetings. The first problem I see is that often these meetings have no goal, or there's a goal and the participants are not prepared. And I put them close together because I think they lead to very similar things and similar outcomes. So let's talk about first of a meeting has no goal. Well, I think there's two cases here. One is there's no clear goal of the meeting, but a goal actually exists. So there's a reason for these people to meet, but we just haven't made it clear. Well, this typically leads us to wasting time and are just unlikely to accomplish whatever that goal is. Wasting time because we're not going to have to take time out of the meeting to get people on the same page of why we're even meeting in the first place. And then people have to kind of context switch, change gears before we can actually talk about what we wanted to talk about. And that means just wasted time away from those really important things. And so it just makes it more likely that we're just not going to accomplish whatever our goal is. Another one that I actually see surprisingly common is that there is no clear goal for the meeting, and then there actually is no reason, there is no actual business case for these people to meet, in which case we've just wasted a lot of time because there is no reason to have this meeting. We just got a bunch of people together and incurred all that cost, but we really didn't need to meet at all. And so not having a goal is like a very common reason for these meetings to be ineffective and leading to wasted time and wasted resources. The second one is if we have a goal, let's say, and it's clear, but the participants aren't prepared to actually accomplish that goal. And so what this typically happens is it definitely wastes time because now we're trying to talk about things, but people maybe don't have the requisite knowledge for it. So we have to spend a good portion of the meeting just catching people up on what they need to know in order to actually have a productive discussion. And this, again, wastes time that could have gone towards our goal, but now is not going towards our goal. And so it's unlikely we're going to be able to accomplish our goal because we wasted so much time. And then the extreme case of this is that, maybe we just waste the whole meeting. Maybe it's just not possible to catch up these participants. And so we can't make a decision because we need informed participants, things like this. And so we just waste the meeting. And so the outcome of this, of having no goal, or having a goal but the participants are not prepared for it, is that we typically need to have an additional meeting. So we had this expensive thing, now we have to have another expensive thing. The next problem I see a lot is, let's say we have a goal. Let's say that the people are prepared to talk about that and go towards the goal. But the meeting goes off track. Maybe we have some side conversations and the side conversation is interesting and then we kind of bring it up. And maybe it is important to the company. Maybe it's like something important between a few participants that the company should talk about, but it's just not relevant to the current goal that we're trying to achieve. This leads to the same problem of wasting time. So we're talking about things, even if they're important, but they're just not important for the goal that we're trying to accomplish here. And thus it takes away time from actually accomplishing the goal we as a group have set out to accomplish, which leads to needing to have a new meeting, a new expensive thing in order to accomplish that original goal we had. Again, an effective meeting. And the last common pattern of problems that I see is that the meeting is forgotten. So let's say we did everything else right. We had a clear goal. We had all of our participants prepared. We stayed on track the whole time. But now it's a few weeks later and we are coming back to this project and we are trying to build off of what we talked about in that meeting. But maybe we can't remember everything we talked about. Maybe we forgot about a specific decision. Maybe we forgot about a risk that one person brought up, and now we're not sure if that risk was important or not. Well, this leads to two things. One, we waste time trying to recover those outcomes, and sometimes we do get the outcomes out and we can kind of continue on, but a lot of times we can't because we just can't really remember if we are remembering correctly or not. We're humans. We have notoriously poor memories, and so this is pretty common. And then the worst case is that we remember something, but that thing that we remember is just not right. It is actually the wrong outcome, and so we end up making a bad decision. We make a decision on bad data, and now instead of just wasting time, we're now making a negative thing because we did something with confidence that is just wrong. And so one of the most common outcomes of this is that we again have to redo this meeting because we aren't confident about the decisions, or if we were confident and it was wrong, we made a bad decision, now we need to hold a new meeting to kind of resolve it. And so what I want you to take away from this section is that these three really common patterns of ineffective meetings typically lead us to needing to have more meetings to resolve the core goal. And because meetings are so expensive, this leads to a lot more cost. So how do we deal with this? How do we overcome these common pitfalls and actually run effective meetings? Well, let's go through each of the common pitfalls one by one and kind of talk about some solutions to how we can resolve these. So the first problem was that we have no goal and that the participants aren't prepared for the discussion. Well, the solutions for this are pretty simple. First, we can just have clear goals. We can have clear discussion topics that we're going to take to try and get to these goals, and then we can share these out to participants beforehand. If we do this, we have now satisfied that there must be a goal, and this is kind of, an exercise for the person that created the meeting to make sure that there is a goal and a reason to meet, or maybe there is a goal and maybe this could have been an email, not a meeting. And now we have a clear set of things that we can kind of cover, and so the participants can be prepared for what we're planning to discuss. And now, just because you share this to participants beforehand doesn't mean they're going to read it. Maybe they read it and they forget about it. Maybe they read it and they don't participate. There's no way to force them to do that. But in my experience, once you kind of create a habit of creating these clear goals, these clear discussion topics, and sharing it to people, typically after a few iterations, there's a critical mass of participants that will have prepared. And so it makes those people that don't prepare, and especially those people that don't prepare meeting after meeting, very obvious. And there's this kind of peer pressure for them to be prepared so they're not the odd ones out. Your mileage may vary, depends on the people in your meeting, but that's what I've experienced. Okay, and now solutions to problem 2, which is the meeting goes off track. So yeah, obviously people want to talk. Maybe this is the first meeting that two people have seen each other all week or all month, so they want to talk. And I think the ways that we can solve this are pretty similar. So the first is just have a clear ordered list of discussion topics. If we know what we're going to talk about, then it should be very clear when what people are talking about is not the next thing to talk about. And so when these things happen, what we can do is we can pretty clearly call it out hey, this isn't what we want to talk about. Let's maybe delay this discussion. An easy way to do this is to just add it to the end of the list of the discussion topics. And this usually is a good way to do this because it makes the person that started this off-topic discussion or the people that are involved in it heard. They know that you listened to what they wanted to talk about and that it's scheduled, but there's a system here, and so you're following the system. And so this kind of removes any of personal, issues that might occur and just makes it hey, we'll talk about it just later. And oftentimes, because we've added it to the list, we give them an opportunity to, make their case if they think that this topic is more important than the others. And in most cases, when you put it next to the things that you were going to talk about anyway, these side conversations are totally not important and probably don't even need to get talked about in this meeting series. But it is important to call it out, make sure that everyone knows that it was heard, and just put it on paper that hey, they started this off-topic discussion and we can get to it later if we want, but in most cases, it's not important to even do. And last thing for this is to actually just leave some unstructured time at the start of the meeting. We are humans, we do like talking, especially with work from home and remote and stuff. People don't get to see each other as much as they used to, and we kind of want them to be able to talk if they want. And so a good time to do this is at the very start of the meeting, because it's going to take people time to join. People are going to join late. People are going to not figure out their Zoom audio for whatever reason. So it's going to take a few minutes to do that anyway. This is a great time to allow people to talk about whatever they want. And this also makes a very clear separation where, after 3 minutes or 5 minutes after the start of the meeting, you can say, okay, we're going into structured time and cut that off. Typically, this allows people to get out of their system beforehand so they're not disrupting in the middle of the meeting. And finally, some solutions to solve the problem of meetings being forgotten. So I kind of look at this in the way of if you don't take notes about a meeting, that meeting basically didn't happen because we're just not going to remember what happened in it. Just didn't happen. And so the solutions to this, I think, are to just take notes on all discussions. Even those off-topic discussions that start maybe before we table them, just take notes on what happened in that and then move it to the bottom. This way we can go back and see everything we talked about in this meeting and we're not forgetting anything because we are just so forgetful. The next important thing for this is to just make sure that our notes are in an accessible place. And I think the best way to store notes these days is just in Cloud Docs so that there's just one link, everyone can use the link, and they can get into the document and see everything that we're talking about. So anything like Google Docs or Notion or Dropbox, whatever you want to use, as long as it's got a link and everyone can see the current up-to-date version, I think that's a great place to store it. And then the next thing for this is to actually organize it in near relevant information or in an organized way. I see a lot of teams trying to store individual meeting notes on a calendar, which makes sense when you want to find it for that one instance, like the day of or something. But it makes it really hard to find the notes that you wanted to find before, because it's very unlikely you're going to remember that, like, oh, this is a discussion I had about this project in November. No, you're just going to remember that, oh, this is a discussion I had about this project. And so what I like to do is actually have one set of meeting notes for a given meeting series, whether that's like relevant to a project or a team or whatever the business case is. There's typically one reason that we're meeting. And so if you just have all of the meeting notes that are relevant to that thing in the same place, then one, it's really easy to search for. You can search for keywords. You can also just scroll down to see what we did over the past few weeks or months or anything like that. But it also just means there's one link to find. There's not 50 links for the 50 iterations we did over the last year. There's just one link for all meeting notes for this meeting about this project. So that's what I like to do, and I think it makes it super easy to find these notes later. And so if there's one thing I want you to take away from this is really that an effective meeting, a way to kind of summarize all the solutions to all the problems that we've listed so far, it needs to be clear in what it's trying to accomplish and how it's going to accomplish it, and very accessible, so we can actually make use of this clarity. If there's no accessible, again, it's like you didn't even write anything, it didn't even happen. So it needs to be both clear and accessible. Okay. So that was a lot of theory and stuff like that. And now I want to leave you off with some useful resources for actually implementing this in your own practice, in your own meetings, in your life. And so I think the number one tip I would have for actually implementing these things is to just have a very clear agenda. I think effective meetings have clear agendas, and if you don't have that clear agenda, it's very unlikely you're going to be able to have an effective meeting, because you're not going to have clear goals, you're not going to have clear discussion topics, and those notes are just not going to be accessible later. And so I think a good agenda has all these things. It has those clear goals that we talked about, so we know why we're meeting and we can make sure that we're staying on topic. Has clear discussion topics so that everyone can be prepared for what we're actually going to talk about, and come with the requisite knowledge they need, and also so that we can table those off-topic discussions. And then it's going to have those notes be very accessible to everyone so that we can send it out beforehand, we can refer to them during, and then we can refer back to them later on when we want to know what we talked about. And so here is the agenda that I use for basically all of my meetings. And I like to have a recurring agenda in every kind of meeting series notes, because sometimes, some groups of people like to have an extra thing in there. And so this is just an easy way for every meeting series to just have a section that you can copy and paste for every new meeting instance. And I'll walk over the general areas of this. If you do want to copy and paste this little agenda, you can grab it at the blog post linked here, and I'll have it below. And so the first section is just the greet section. And this is kind of what I was talking about, just the kind of off-topic, unstructured discussion time so people can talk to each other. You're giving time for people to join a little late, giving people time to connect their audio if they're having problems. And this lets people just get things out of their system. Once we've reached critical mass or waited 3 to 5 minutes, whatever it is, then we can actually go into the meeting. And so we're cutting off all off-topic discussion, and we're going directly into the goals. For some meetings, the goal will be to make a decision on a very specific thing. For some goals, it's actually just going to be to get to answer a few different questions, which might just be discussion topics in our discussion. It's going to depend, but having clear goals makes it very clear what we need to get done. And then if we get that done, kind of where we can diverge a little bit. The next section is the actual discussion topic, and this is where most of your time should be spent. And I think it's really important to have them listed in order, and also have who is either leading the discussion or who the idea came from. And so this gives more accountability. So if someone decides to put something somewhere and then maybe they bump it up to second in the list, it's a very clear thing to say, hey, Bob, I see that you put this thing second. What do you want to talk about? And do you really think this is more important than number 3 and number 4? And just having this accountability makes people really, I think, reflect a little bit on what they're trying to say and what they're trying to accomplish and whether that makes sense or not, because their name is next to it. And so I think it's really important to have that topic, to have their name next to it, and also to do this for the discussion that comes after. This gives accountability for what people are saying, and also allows us to trace things back to the source. For instance, if someone brings up a risk, we want to know who came up with that idea so we can follow up with them and be like, hey, want to know more about this, things like that. And finally, follow-ups. We didn't talk about this much in the common pitfalls because I don't think it's a leading reason for ineffective meetings, but I do think most effective meetings will have follow-ups. because that means you actually made progress and that you've got things to do afterwards. And I think this just follows the same kind of template of what is the actual task that we're talking about, and then who's the person assigned to it. And this makes it just super clear when you look back later of what we were trying to accomplish versus like what we actually did. And that's basically what I use for all meetings. And I found like great success in that and the organizations I've been a part of. Now, the recurring agenda is the meat of kind of the template I use for all my meetings. But there's also other parts of it, like how I list out all the meetings, some examples of like how I actually use that, some meta information about like the meeting series, all this stuff that I actually copy and paste and use for each of my meetings. And so if you want the full meeting template, you can grab it at the creationcycle.xyz, which is linked here and below. It's just a full Notion template, but super easy to kind of copy and paste into Google Docs or Dropbox, whatever you're using. You can use it forever, and you've got unlimited free updates as I learn more and iterate on making it even better, effective meetings. So if you want to grab that, the link's here, and I'll also have it in the description. And then, as always, Hyminians members get 50% off all of my products. And so if you want to get 50% off of the template and the other templates that I'm selling via Creation Cycle, you can learn more at the link here and below. And that's it. Let me know if you have any questions, comments. If you disagree with anything I just said about meetings, let me know in the comments, and I'll try to get back to you. And I think that's it. So as always, this is where you can find me on the web for updates and releases of new content like this. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.